David, that sounded like a bird song.
Yeah, well, I see a lot of birds. I've seen one kind of bird I saw yesterday was a what's called a spoonbill, and I think they're called a rosacea spoonbill because they're kind of pink. They from the distance they look kind of white, but they just have a slight pinkish tinge. And of course, if you look at them closely, some of their parts of their body are pink and parts are white. So they're kind of a combination of white and pink. Maybe the neck is more white and the body's more pink, and then the beak is yellow, and it's kind of a shape like a spoon. It's a different shape from most birds' beaks. It's a spoon that.
Is that what contributes to your capacity for imaging?
Well, I'm not sure. I was studying mental imaging long before I ever saw a spoonbill. I saw it started. Those spoonbills are more just in Florida, but with global warming, they've been coming up to Charleston just the last 4 years or so. So I've been seeing them in my backyard the last 4 years. But I started studying mental imagery when I was in graduate school as part of my dissertation, and I was interested in what is this, the unconscious, and it has to do with what we've been talking about, the active imagination, these images in the unconscious mind. Because psychologists have been talking about that. Freud, was analyzing dreams, and Jung, of course, we've been talking a lot about his uses of imagery and active imagination. And then, a lot of at the time in the 70s when I was in school in the 80s, early 80s, a lot of psychologists were using guided imagery, maybe for relaxation or for imagining the future, imagining goals and things like that. So I was wondering what is all this use of imagery, and maybe it has to do with creativity. In other words, what is counseling really, or psychotherapy really? Really, it's the attempt to create a better life for a person, to create a better way of being, a better way of relating to the world, better ways of thinking, feeling, acting. So it's making us different. We're somehow creating ourselves. So we're both the artist and the canvas. We're painting a picture of ourselves with our creativity. We get to decide to a large extent what our goals are and what directions we're aiming at. But then this creativity can be a big aid. The unconscious mind, the imagination, creativity is what can really help us in creating a better life. And so my hypothesis was that maybe this imagery works in all kinds of therapy because what it does is it stimulates creativity. And in particular, part of creativity I was interested in was divergent thinking. There's a lot of brainwashing going on now where a lot of big companies and big media stations are trying to get everybody to think the same way. But creativity and freedom comes from being able to think many different ways, to think divergently, to come up with 100 different ideas for some topic or whatever. So when I was studying the literature on creativity, I studied, some of the kind of the dimensions of mental imagery. And, we haven't really talked about that yet in our discussions, but I think they're relevant to this topic of active imagination. And one of the dimensions, for example, is vivid. How vivid is the imagery? And I think I had said in one of our earlier discussions that I found for myself it wasn't very vivid at all. But then some of the things that become memorable is when it becomes more vivid, like that the image of the dragon that I talked about. That was, a more vivid imagery because I could start to see the color of the fire. It's kind of an orange color that I could see coming out of the dragon's mouth and down on the earth. And the earth, I could see parts that were brown with dirt and parts that were green with plant life. So there was more vividness of it. Another dimension is autonomy. Are you kind of trying to control the image and kind of consciously forcing it, or is it just happening spontaneously and autonomously? And I think in that dragon imagery, like it became spontaneous. Like I was seeing the dragon in a dark alley, and all of a sudden I was on the back of the dragon, and then all of a sudden the dragon was flying and breathing fire. I mean, that all just happened without me, thinking too much. It just kind of happened. It seemed to be spontaneous. So these are some of the things that as we develop skills in active imagination, our imagery can become more vivid and more spontaneous, more autonomous, like it has a life of its own. So those are just some of my thoughts this week when I was thinking about what we might be talking about today.
Rodney?
I don't know. Uh, that kind of brought me to thinking about biofeedback. Um, you know, being able to kind of measure um, some of those experiences, and I believe that is one of the uses of biofeedback amongst many. To be able to kind of measure how can we get a visual uh, image or measure um, imagination, thoughts,
Well, that's
feelings.
been done to an extent with EEG brainwaves. Like I've got a guy who was in my high school class, Richie Davidson. He became a
Mm,
psychologist,
mm,
and he was expert in studying brainwaves. And he was interested in Buddhist meditation. He actually measured the brainwaves of lots of the Dalai Lamas, people who study with the Dalai Lama, some of the Buddhist monks, and he measured their brainwave patterns under states of meditation. I
mm,
think you could probably do a similar thing with people who are using active imagination and experiencing mental imagery. You could probably see what goes on with their brain. So, and then, of course, a brainwave scan, what he was doing using an EEG feedback basically to measure it. Of course, there's more advanced brain scans where you can see it in 3 dimensions and different parts of it
right.
light up in different colors and things like that. So I'm sure you could do some studies like that. I'm sure you could do some studies like that. Uh,
Mhm. Those those are very those are very important studies, particularly sometimes I imagine that a person who is involved in active imagination closes the eyes and begins to self-report. Sometimes we measure, we see, we see various, delta. We can measure brain waves. That's one way. Um, and there are instruments, machines that take those things. That's one way. I also think of self-report, where people begin to, because it's a process of immersion. What if David and I were to do an experiment now where, David, you could hold a little flute in the background for me, if you don't mind, just hold it lightly. And I would say something like, okay, people, just close your eyes whilst you're seated here with us. Just close your eyes. And as you close your eyes, allow yourself to just float into yourself with the very silently. You just slowly allow yourself to relax into yourself. And as you do so, as you go along, you feel, you see, you sense. And, mark the things that you see and you sense, no matter what it is, even though it's a blob, a flash of color, a memory, a thought. They are good things. They come to constitute, to make up how you are really feeling now. But you're not holding on to anything. It's like an immersion. You're just going down and you're sinking into yourself. You cannot drown. So and as you go along, you observe a new environment. You feel a silence. And it is basically this can be measured also, where I could say that as I immerse, I see a white patch. It has a long tail of light. There's a flash of green, very wonderful lemon green, which is said to be the color of the heart chakra. I could interpret that to mean that we, three of us, enjoy doing what we're doing and we are having a very good time doing it. And other persons can join us in this quieting, just letting go, not holding on to any particular thought, and just allowing yourself to so-called just sink into yourself. And over time, what you find happening is that as you become calmer and calmer and gentler, you are producing and providing a subtle energy to your own belly, your own chest, your own heart, your own head. You are leveling out your thoughts, you're becoming quieter. You may even feel a sense, a heartbeat, if you are silent with your heart, you know. And in a sense, you see things. You can visualize, like David would say, you would visualize a tree, visualize a bird, visualize, you know. And I think those are measurable things, and those are very important, ways of knowing also when people can find a way to say, hey, I see a flash of right, I see a flash of blue, I see green, I see stars, I see white circles, I see nothing, I see darkness. See, and a person can measure the brainwaves of one person who sees nothing and another who has quite a bit of excitement in the cerebral cortex. So it's fun. It's important to be able to, as Rodney said, measure those things, because we can now determine, are we having a slower heart rate? Is that a good thing? Of course it is. Are we having a sort of restful? Are we finding ourselves more restful? Of course it is. After we are gone, somebody could write in a note and say, hey guys, after your little exercise, I just felt so relaxed and I think I'm going to do it again. That is also helpful. So I
But one
just
of the,
thought, mm,
sorry, yeah, one of the things I was going to interject is one of the challenges is that the Western brain has been so trained that to to believe that unless you're busy, you're not being productive. And so our notion of slowing down, of turning within to examine our inner thoughts, you know, get into a meditative state is so um, foreign to many individuals within Western society. It's all a part of Eastern philosophy, Eastern societies. Meditation is a regular practice. Not to say that it's not done here, because it is. There are many individuals, in yoga and Tai Chi type of exercises, and various other type of meditative activities. But the whole notion of slowing down and turning within is continues. I would maintain continues to still be somewhat of a challenging foreign uh, ideal in Western society, because again, unless you're busy, active, doing something, then you're not considered productive. I was
But then
listening.
I would add that it's a good investment of your time. And I think people in the West can understand investment of money. Probably the most successful people are the ones who have some form of introspective practice, meditation, prayer, some kind of rest. They have a way of refreshing their batteries and thinking clearly. Like maybe the people who are grunting around and struggling and working all the time and trying to get ahead, they're not getting ahead that much. The ones who really are getting ahead are the ones who've learned to make that investment in themselves.
Yeah, there was a young lady who is a fitness coach online, and she talked about a revelation that she had because finished her undergraduate degree in exercise science, went on and got a master's degree, very active, always on the go. But then she realized that she was kind of facing burnout, because really what she was trying to avoid by staying active and staying busy was dealing with some of the inner uh, challenges, turmoil, traumas that she experienced. And I think a lot of times that's what's happening with many individuals, is that they're afraid to calm down and turn within and reflect on some of the challenges that they're having, because then they're brought face to face with some of the imagery behind maybe some of the challenges, trauma, and what have you. But again, active imagination, we're suggesting, would allow one to kind of explore, those inner thoughts, those inner feelings, using inner calming mechanism, whether it be the music, whether it be the imagery, whatever, to then center oneself, calm oneself, and then begin to kind of work through some of the challenges that we face. And that's not an easy task, again, given all that's going on, all the competition for our time, our attention, whether it be social media, whether it be television, you name it. We're always busy, 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 and
And those things aren't helping us that much. All the time we're spending on Facebook, I don't think it's helping us that much.
not at all. Well, and then now they're taking some research, and I'm still trying to kind of better understand it, about projecting the consciousness into the future. And so,
Yeah.
so I don't know, Stein, if you've heard much or read much about that, or even, David, about this whole notion of being able to project the consciousness into the future, and work with that. I'm not quite up on it as of yet, but this is some of where the latest research. Have you heard anything on that, Stein?
Reminds me of a conversation I was having via text messages with three other men here in Charleston. We've had a little discussion group about the Middle East and what's going on, and there's people of different religions, and some are Arabs and some are Jews, some are Christian, and we're the four of us are talking about this. And one thing that we were talking about is, well, maybe part of what we can do, sending peace and love throughout the universe, like a vibration into the future, like we're and I said, well, yeah, maybe if it hadn't been for all the people praying and meditating for peace over the last 60 years, the whole world would have blown up by now. I mean, sometimes it gets discouraging. We're trying to envision a future of peace and love and caring and prosperity for everybody on the planet. We could have a beautiful vision, and we can meditate on it and pray for it and hope for it and think about it and talk about it. And yet, meanwhile, it seems to be getting worse and worse. Yet, on the other hand, if we hadn't been doing it, how bad could it be? And maybe we haven't been doing it as much lately as we were, like out of the 60s and 70s. Maybe more people were meditating and praying, and now a lot of the thoughts and prayers and meditations have been, maybe in other directions. And if people who are concerned about peace and love and caring, maybe if we do meditate and pray and see that future, visualize that future when we all are living in harmony with love and brotherhood and sisterhood for all humanity, that might be a positive influence in the universe. It might even make a difference in what actually happens in the future.
Mhm. I remembered from Maharishi International University, there was something they were presenting, that when the square root of 1% of any population sits together, or for a period 20, 30 minutes, probably half an hour, in a meditation, levels of violence drop, traffic accidents drop, at a certain distance from where the meditation is taking place. But that has been known for so long. I have read experiments of two people sitting down in two different rooms, and one person thinks something, and they can put on measurement things on the other person's head, and they can determine their brainwaves. And so there's communication that is taking place between persons. The whole, I mean, all of us have had girlfriends, and we know what synchronicity is. Oh, I was just thinking about you when the phone rang, that kind of thing. So those are some of the snippets of it. As relates to the question of looking into the future, um, it's what I might, when you first said it, Rodney, I thought of the word tautology, which is like saying sweet honey. I think this happens naturally if a person is in a state of meditation, I think invariably, if I were to follow along the lines of the Buddhist and Hindu philosophy, there is the opening up of the chakras as a result of a meditation. Certain parts, of, certain energy centers in the body are activated. The brain chemistry is just as is just as active in the process. And what happens? Let us say you have the eye chakra, the brow, not the brow, but just the third eye, what you call the ash, it is activated also. And in the process, what it has been shown to do is um to to advance clairvoyance, and the ability to see ahead. So in a sense, maybe they may be, and not necessarily the same as prediction, which is a controlled kind of activity. But this is already happening because, um, for instance, in some of the broader files, you where they look at melanin among people of color, black people particularly. Um, Browder argues that between 2 and 6 a.m., the third 2 and 5 a.m., the third eye can open up, and a person begins to dream and see visions and have, because that is the time the brain is producing its melatonin, and that is the time the melanin component of the body is replenished, and it bathes the expression used, it bathes the brain, with its chemistry. So, but that allows for, and that advances the business of looking ahead and for being able to see in the future. I don't know in your cultures, David, in Jewish culture, I know you have a lot of things. I don't know if it was within the African American culture here, Rodney, but I know sometimes in our culture, you have people who say certain things and they come to pass, and people say they have good mouth when they speak. I don't know why the goat, if it's a sign of the Capricorn, something, but they say things and these things come to pass. How do people know those things? Those simple nuggets of stuff, those are very, very important things for us, indicators of that capacity for looking in and out into the future.
I was, while you were talking, Stan, I was doing a little research here, and it talks about the law of projected consciousness, the idea that everything we perceive in the external world is a projection of our inner state, the thoughts, beliefs, emotions, and subconscious patterns. So, it's as if our outer world is a reflection of our inner world, which goes back to our whole notion of using active imagination to calm that inner world, so that our external world is less chaotic. They also talk about the fact and ask the question, what is it called when you project your consciousness? And in esotericism, it refers to astral projection, also known as astral travel, soul journey, soul wandering, spiritual journey, spiritual travel. But of course, one would have to believe that there is a soul, that there is a spirit, and that you have that ability. You just were talking about, Stein, about the dream state that we find ourselves in, and that's all tied into all tied within in that whole notion, that whole concept, and that ability to be able to do that. But if your inner world is chaotic, and sometimes they would say that we work through problems and solutions in our dreams, solutions to what's going on in the outer world, is sometimes reflected in the dream state, in the inner world, but we're too busy, we're too unaware.
How does that connect into divergence, neurodivergence?
Interesting. David, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was thinking that really in creativity, like I said, divergent thinking, getting different thoughts is helpful. And so, in that sense, thinking about all different kind of things. So even that concept of like astral projection, say for example, some people might automatically turn off their mind when they hear that because it sounds like it's some foreign thing, or it's like a superstition, or it's kind of in the class of conspiracy theories, or something that most mainstream psychologists or scientists don't consider. Yet there's some people who believe in it. But whether it's literally true or not, a creative person would ask the question, well, how can I use that idea? So, even if the astral projection doesn't exist in the real world, but you can imagine it, if you can imagine going to some foreign planet in a galaxy far away and you come up with some answer and you bring it back to Earth and that solves your problem here on Earth, well, that's great. Even if it didn't exist outside of your own imagination, it still exists in some sense. It's still a fuel for creativity. It's still part of the human imagination, which is vast and infinite and could be anything and anywhere. And once if is the imagination real? You could say, well, if you can imagine, it's real. Like in olden times, people imagined flying, like they'd fly like a bird or something like that. They'd fly just with their own body, and eventually that and maybe some people thought they were crazy if they thought they were flying, and they probably were because if they jumped off a cliff and tried to fly, they'd probably kill themselves. But look at what we can do today with all the airplanes, and we're flying all over the place with no problem.
Yeah,
New York to California, no problem. London to Paris, no problem. Paris to
yeah,
Tokyo, no problem. We can fly anywhere we want. So I mean,
yes, yes.
things that we can imagine can later on become reality in some way or other. Maybe if they're not exactly as imagined or exactly as thought about, they could become true in some other way.
And, and I wonder if those who have divergent thinking have a greater ability with creative visualization. Creative visualization is this notion that through focusing on whatever it is that you want to create, you focus on that, which then eventually will bring it down from the ethereal plane, and so it's embodied in thought and in mind, and then eventually through creative visualization you bring it down to the physical third dimensional world in which we live in. And so as you suggest, David, yeah, uh, someone had to have a vision of flight and what an airplane might be. Of course, we can go back in history, and some would argue that is as old as time, that man thought about thought about flight, whether it was through birds, or whether it would be, some would say, now I'm getting off into some dangerous areas here. We talk about visitors from the Pleiades, or you know
Yes.
uh,
Mhm.
what have you, from other places that came and exhibited flight. But anyway, that's a whole nother topic,
Subject.
subject. But
Wow.
so a lot of ideals and thoughts that
I'm
are
sure enough
being
topics to last us for the rest of our lives.
right.
And when you think, we could also even say, if we're talking creativity and imagination, we could suggest, if we say everything that is in the universe is in you. So am I likely to
Mm,
find stars? Do I have
mm,
planets in me? Do I have moons in me?
mm.
Do I have plants in me? Do I have oceans? What is it? And what is around me? Is it also represented in me? You
Some would
see?
argue yes.
Yes.
Yes, because just like the when we think of infinity, we think of infinitely big, like things getting bigger and bigger. But infinity is also getting smaller and smaller. So if you take, say, you take a number like you take a number like one and you cut it in half, then you have a half. Then you cut it in half, you have a quarter. And then you cut it in half, you have an eighth. And then you cut it in half, you have a 16th. And you could do that forever. There's no limit to how small you can look, how much detail you can look inside the human. So we're infinite on the inside, just like the universe is infinite on the outside. Our inner world is infinite on the inside.
Yes, yes. So when
Interesting.
somebody, Mhm. Go ahead, Rodney.
Going to say interesting stuff, gentlemen. But I know we're getting close to
The
the, uh,
time out.
the
Yes.
the top of our hour here. I'm wondering,
Wow.
David, if you want to salute us with another ensemble from your repertoire.
Ensemble. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Rodney, you're going to close us off? Uh,
Yes, well, as always, great conversation, gentlemen. Thank you to Dr. David Cernoff and Dr. Steinberg Henry for today's discussion. I'm Dr. Rodney Penniman, wishing you all a very active imagination.